Hello, everybody. Welcome to Character Study Survivor Podcast. My name is Tristan Floor. That's Tyler Climbs. We are back with a character with a complex legacy here. One of the OG fan favorites, Stephenie LaGrossa Kendrick, who played on Survivor Palau, who played on Survivor Guatemala the very next season, played on Heroes versus Villains, and for 30 seasons we didn't see her, but she was back again for Survivor 50. And it was an interesting run for Steph. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster in her Survivor career, and we're here to talk all about it. Tyler, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, just like you said, a lot of ups and downs for Stephenie. So it is going to be interesting to talk about those going chronologically because, yeah, she does go on quite a journey in Survivor.
And there's a lot here in terms of just different spaces in her life and different spaces in her Survivor journey, right? It's interesting to view her as the evolution of the show as well. So if you're wondering who we are, we're producers and storytellers in the sports media sphere that love Survivor and the characters that make the show great. And we do this show because we're trying to answer the question of what makes a great Survivor character. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, like and subscribe here on YouTube. We've been getting some good engagement recently. Let's keep that up. Be a main character, right? Make sure that you are the one of the first ones to support us here. Let us know what you want to see, who you want us to talk about, because we're not going to talk about Survivor 50 forever. We're moving into different topics. We're moving into different things. We might talk about Survivor 51. We might do viewer's choice, who you want us to talk about. We'll see what happens next, but we're going to ride out season 50. We've gotten this far. Might as well finish it out, right?
Yep, let's finish that journey.
So let's talk. Oh, I don't want to go on a journey. We just talked about Jimmy Fallon. After
Well,
that,
let's get the journey over with so we can be done. Yeah.
I'm done. All right. But Stephenie did go on a journey in season 50, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So Stephenie LaGrossa Kendrick was 45 years old on Survivor 50, was 25 on Palau, and that is where her journey starts. She placed 7th on Survivor Palau, finished 2nd on Guatemala, and 19th on Heroes versus Villains, placed 10th on Survivor 50. You ready to get into Palau?
Yeah, let's dive into Palau first. I mean, that's the season where Stephenie, obviously it's her first season, but you think back to Stephenie now seeing her on 4 total seasons of Survivor, Palau I think is the one everyone would remember from her. It was
No
she
doubt.
became the legacy character at the time, which is kind of interesting to look back upon because when she was announced for 50, the hype level was a bit lower than the other legends of the time, such as Colby, even Ozzy a little bit
Yeah.
in that realm too. But keep in mind, and for those who might not have been watching live at the time, Stephenie was the big name on Palau, especially after being the last one standing, as you see behind me, on her original tribe, going with Bobby John to the end of their tribe phase of the game. That was an unprecedented moment, and I think I mean, there's other reasons as well, but it's a massive reason why she comes back, not once, not twice, but 3 more times.
Yeah, she's a production favorite for sure, and definitely a CBS favorite. We're talking about these hero characters, right? She's on the Heroes tribe in Heroes versus Villains. She is the female version in terms of the fan voting interest of like a Rupert or a Colby. Like that is the level that Stephenie was at in terms of popularity. And for some people, probably even more. I don't know if anyone could touch Rupert. He got $1 million just for being a fan favorite, right? But you know, all Rupert aside, Steph was there. But let's get into how she got there. Let's get into Survivor Palau. At the marooning, she jumped off the boat to try to be the first to grab the immunity necklace, but jumped too early and was the last to shore. And this might be a little harsh. I feel like this is almost a bit of a microcosm of Stephenie's Survivor career.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I was gonna say the same exact thing.
I'm happy I'm not the only jerk here, at
No,
least. And this is
yeah,
with all due respect, right? Like, and this is like not us trying to like bash. This is just us trying to view the perspective from a 50,000-foot view and try to
yeah,
look
that's
at
what
her
we're doing
story.
here.
Yeah,
That's I mean the podcast. We're a character study podcast.
yeah.
We're gonna try and dive into how the characters have evolved over the seasons. And I think it
Hmm.
makes sense. Let's fully dive into your analogy here with it, no pun intended, with the diving in.
Mm.
But Stephanie jumps out of the boat, right? Gets started early. She has that really great start. Even in that episode, she's heavily talked about because she's one of the two people, I think it was two people that jumped out of the boat. Um, which big name because of that. Then she kind of realizes, oh, now I'm just stuck treading water, trying to swim back to shore, right? And that's kind of the Guatemala, the heroes versus villains phase of it all, where she
Hmm.
does go super far on Guatemala, but there's been behind the scenes talk of why that could potentially be, which I do want to dive into later.
Yep.
And then heroes versus villains, she obviously goes out early and flames out, but then eventually, after a long time, she does get to shore, making it onto Survivor 50 years and years later. But now it's a little too late. Everyone else is already there. There's been bigger names that have been established. Alliances are starting to be built, and Stephanie is along for the ride. Does have a decent run, but never really becomes that big name again.
That's true. And, once she gets to shore here in the actual what we see on Palau, Palau worked a little different than most seasons. Started with 20 people, was narrowed down to 18. They started on one tribe, and they did a schoolyard pick to determine
Yeah.
tribes. I think we might be seeing this on Survivor 51, by the way. So maybe a good refresher, at least the
Hmm.
premiere of Palau. But she's picked to be on the Oolong tribe by Bobby John in a tribe schoolyard pick. And unfortunately for her, Oolong might be the worst tribe in Survivor history in terms of just pure challenge performance. And despite Stephanie's athleticism, I mean, she played in college. She was an athlete.
Hmm.
She has a lot of experience. She's fit. She has been her entire career on Survivor. I mean, she married an MLB pitcher, but Oolong was just one of the worst tribes ever in Survivor history.
She pulled her weight as much as she could. I mean, she has some great challenge moments, which is another reason why she's memorable because she's still fighting very hard, but yeah, they could not get anything done. And the dynamics on that tribe were just I mean, everything was just falling apart because they just continued to go back to tribal, obviously, and you can't really build anything. But that one connection you talked about earlier with Stephanie and Bobby John becomes a two-season arc, not just a one-season arc.
Well, and it's not entirely fair to Oolong because I think most tribes would lose to Karor with Tom and Ian as the
Yeah.
leaders, right? Two of the great challenge performers in Survivor history. Um, but she has to vote out her alliance member Angie after a deadlock between Bobby John and Angie. After Ibrahim is gifted immunity, and then another deadlock at the next vote, and has to turn on another ally in James. Bobby John then votes out Ibrahim instead of Steph at final 11 after Oolong lost their seventh immunity challenge in a row. Seven in a row. I think they won a reward in there,
Hmm.
but no dice on immunity.
I rewatched this season a couple months ago, and I'm like, I knew obviously what happens with their tribe. I'm like, they have to win something, right? No. No. Just no.
It is just unbelievable. Like what we see, right? And you would think like a challenge that loses all the time. Is there anyone that gets somewhat of a heroic edit here? And the answer is yes, in Stephanie, right? Like we see this a lot in the new era. The new era is the era of the disaster tribe, right? And Stephanie's really the model of the character that happens so often in the new era. Think of like Sophie Bolardi in Survivor 49, right? The person who survives the really terrible tribe. Ironically, Emily Flippen, who we're
Yeah.
talking about later this week, right? The person that survives the disaster tribe goes on, makes a run, right? Stephanie doesn't get overly far, but that's a tough thing when you're literally a tribe of one. Um, but I think Stephanie's the model here on an underdog character. And I think that's what really endeared her to audiences.
For sure, yeah. At the time, people cared a lot more about the athleticism, the outplay portion of the game,
Yeah.
and that was what Stephanie was really good at. And I think there's a lot of credit that's due to her for surviving some rounds once they get to their merge portion of the
Yeah.
game. she's a tribe of one going in against a intact tribe and still has to work her way around those alliances and does so as long as she could.
Yeah. Well, let's get to how she becomes a tribe of one, which is defeating Bobby John in a fire-making challenge to remain in a game, becomes the first and only tribe of one. One of the great hero moments and scenes in the history of the show. Stephenie sitting there all alone, Jeff telling her to go back to camp, her in the canoe by herself heading off to Karor. I mean,
Hmm.
this is an episode that is an all-timer in terms of hero moment for one character. Like if you were to look up what a hero scene is in the dictionary, this would pop.
Yeah, again, I keep going back to this phrase, but at the time this was unprecedented. And now we'll
Yeah.
see journeys or people staying in exile overnight or whatever it may be, where players are alone and having to deal with the edge of extinction, all that type of stuff. But at the time, this was unprecedented to be going alone by yourself, especially after watching all of your tribe mates be eliminated from the game, in part because of what you had to do,
Yeah.
battling in fire to keep yourself alive, and now trying to figure out how the heck you're going to continue to play this game after your entire first half of the game went the exact opposite of how you hoped.
Well, she forms a relationship with Kobe once she gets to Karor, rekindles the bond with Tom and Ian that was formed on day one on the island. And Tom and Ian's islands alliance takes out Kobe, keeping Stephenie safe that first round, and then Stephenie is saved once again once Janu quits. So Stephenie does advance a couple of rounds there. Some circumstances that are not totally her doing, right? But it is kind of hard when you're the only person, right, of trying to make something happen here. And this wasn't in an era where that was totally something that was going to happen. This was more the loyalty era, right? Especially in this season. Um, at the final seven, she pleads to Tom, Ian, and Karen to stay, but Steph was voted out unanimously due to the narrative she holds as the ultimate survivor. Dare I say, one of the first things about narrative we've ever seen in the show?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, All Stars, I guess, with Boston Rob, um, in terms of pre-existing relationships, I guess to a certain extent.
Hmm.
Um, I don't. I mean, you could argue, I guess, Rupert and Pearl Islands being like the ultimate pirate.
Yeah.
But I really think this is it. I think Colby is probably the first metagamer in terms of like his thinking of how he was going to show up on TV based on the way Hatch was shown on TV in Borneo, right? But I think this is really the first like narrative vote out in the history of the show.
I can't think of anything else. Yeah, and
And this is something
it
that
is.
Tom's really good at because he does the same thing to Ian, right? In the
Oh yeah.
pole challenge, he
Oh yeah.
twists that dude so hard he doesn't know what way's up
Yeah.
throughout that entire thing.
He
Granted,
knows what
being
weighs
out,
down when he drops down, but that's
yeah.
about it.
I mean, great dismount though.
Yeah, for sure. That's
Uh,
after being up there for so long. I feel like
as Jeff said, the ceremonial loser dismount. Shout out
big Jeff
Benry.
moment right there.
But yeah, nobody was taken and executed there.
No.
But yeah, I mean, Ian's game chances were, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But Tom, and we'll talk about Tom another time, right? I'm assuming he's going to be one that maybe is requested at some point. Um, I might just throw him in so I can say his heroes versus villains line as many times as I possibly can. But you know, we'll get there when we come to it. But she does vote for Tom to win, and that's kind of the end of her journey on Palau. And she's a shoo-in for the next All-Star season. But Survivor production had a different idea.
Yeah, that idea was something that now comes with a lot of questions, controversy, whatever it may be. But I mean, we've seen an era where captain seasons in the 30 were huge. This was kind of the soft launch of that idea. Let's try and throw out two players that succeeded on a previous season that was close to the one now, very popular, and see what happens when we just throw them out there again.
Did they succeed or did they fail spectacularly?
I think they failed spectacularly.
And this is like the falling with style question from Toy
Yeah,
Story, right?
yeah,
Uh, so her tribe, so you first get introduced to Stephenie in Guatemala. They're up on this Mayan temple that come out. Everyone's looking up at them. They look like Mayan gods, right? As they're up on this temple, they integrate into the tribe, where you get maybe the worst marooning challenge in Survivor history, the hike through the woods, where everyone is puking their brains out. Uh,
terrible.
Talk about things I don't want to do for 1,000, Alex. Never, never.
No.
Um, but her tribe begins losing challenges immediately, and the question is raised, can Stephenie not win challenges?
Yeah, and that becomes obviously something she's been competitive for a long time in her life. She just dealt with losing so much, but then comes back, sees the response that her losing in Palau was kind of her winning in her survivor status, her legend in the
Hmm.
show. Now she has a chance to change that legend into what would be legendary gameplay, legendary outplay portion of the game. And yeah, it starts to crumble again early, and that's got to be something that messes with her psyche a little bit.
She eventually does start to win challenges,
Yeah.
right? She builds bonds with Rafe and Jamie on her original tribe. After the tribe swap, they convince Judd to flip. Her tribe then becomes dominant in challenges, goes into the merge with the Majority Alliance, and this is a cutthroat game from Stephenie. You could not find a bigger maybe shift in between two styles of gameplay between Stephenie in Palau and Stephenie in Guatemala. Just
Yeah.
completely different.
She started to figure out the game, and I think
Yeah.
the pre-merge portion of Palau helped with that because you mentioned earlier she did kind of have to jump alliances, and when she got to the post-merge, she had to try and find different ways to maneuver. So she did get that experience. A lot of Survivor players say that it's good to go to at least one tribal in the pre-merge to get some experience, right? And then coming back as a returning player, even if you didn't win, if you go to more tribals, you know how the votes can work a bit more. You can work out the numbers in new, unique ways, or you've just seen more possibilities, seen how people react in the tribal council setting. There's just a lot of things that Stephenie and Bobby John have a heads up on with everyone already coming into the season because they played. Not only they played, they've been in those seats at tribal council many times in the past.
Well, and we get to Steph's portion of her game at the merge where she starts making and breaking promises like nobody's business. She
Yeah.
votes out Brandon at the final 10 and honored a promise to Bobby John to let him be a jury member. That might be the only promise that she honors for the season. She helps Rafe blindside her close ally, Jamie, promises Judd's wife at the family reward that she would go with them to the final two, then proceeds to vote him out at the very same round, burning another ally. And Rafe, Danny, and Stephenie make a final three pact here, where she votes Cindy out, again burning an ally.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of ways the gameplay makes sense, the rationale makes sense, but it's just the way she gets there. It's
And
the
it's
way that she's
it's it's not
done.
hard to see why she doesn't win this season.
Yeah, for sure. I think even she would realize looking back on it now that there was better ways to handle those conversations because if you don't have the right conversations beforehand, you can make a great move and someone can realize that that was a great move against them, but it doesn't matter. Juries are not always going to vote on, wow, you got me, that was a great move. They have all the right in the world to vote on it. You told me this and you lied to me. I don't respect you as a person for that, so don't expect to get my vote. And that's where it all goes.
All I'm saying is, I think if Stephenie played this way in Survivor 50, might have had a shot.
Yeah,
If she
yeah.
flipped her gameplay from Guatemala to 50, if she played the way she played 50 Guatemala and she played the way she played Guatemala on Survivor 50, then I think we got something cooking here.
The modern era of Survivor is that gameplay, right? That I'm going to turn on you and I'll explain it later,
Look
right?
at
You hear that
Jesse
so
and
many
Cody.
times. Yep. Yeah, Jesse says I'll explain it later. Cody, obviously not everyone will respond the way Cody does, but he understands, accepts, and realizes that's what Jesse had to do to win the game. So yeah, I think there's the chops are here for Stephenie. That's all
Hmm.
over both of her seasons. Not as much in Heroes Villain just because we don't get as much time to
Yeah.
kind of digest that. Like the GG steak, not much time to digest that either. But yeah, I think it's definitely I had to bring that in at
I
some
didn't
point.
think you were going there. That's
I had to
all
say it.
right. Fair.
Um, so yeah, I think this kind of sets up the beginning of a downfall era for
Hmm.
Stephanie.
Yeah, it's pretty downhill from here, unfortunately, for Stephenie. She chooses to go with Rafe to vote out Lydia at the final four rather than Danny, which was her choice, right? Rafe very much wanted to take out Lydia other more than Danny. I think Rafe really very much understood the fact that he was going to have to sit next to somebody just as unlikable as him in terms of gameplay and burning people, because Rafe really was the strategic force in this season. It's kind of a shame we haven't gotten Rafe back on the show because I think current, more modern gameplay would really suit his style. But neither here nor there, right? We're here to talk about Stephenie. Danny wins the final immunity challenge, takes Stephenie to the final two, and Stephenie only gets Rafe's vote at final tribal council. A result that it's hard to explain in terms of what the fans were feeling. To a certain extent, it was very much laid out why she lost the game. But at the same time, we didn't really see why Danny won the game either.
And a big reason why that is because after the season, a lot of information way after the season has started to come out now that Danny was purposely, this is alleged, I'm not saying this for sure happened, but
I think she
uh,
confirmed it. She
yeah,
said this
I
in
guess
an interview.
yeah, well, I guess her perspective is that she was withholding information that is confirmed, but the reason she was doing it is because this is the alleged part. She thought that the production of Survivor was going to use the information that she gave to them to try and help Stephanie or Bobby John win the game because that's why they wanted to bring them back, bring back those fan favorite characters to win the game. I mean, it's something that why production really liked Redemption Island when that season came out because I'm not saying they were trying to like they were making Boston Rob win the game, but I mean it certainly pushed something that they wanted to see happen, and
Hmm.
they could have very well been trying to do that, or like whether it be realized by them or not. So yeah, I think that's a huge factor in all of this. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think for sure. And, Danny's spoken like a true radio host, right? Like
Mm.
people in media, people that ask questions like we are, we understand that sometimes we do a few questions that are leading people to say what we want them to say at certain times, right? Like it's not like straight up asking them, but there are ways to get around it. Survivor Production is not going to straight up ask those questions, but they are good enough that they are going to find the question that gets them to the answer that they want.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because that's something I think that gives us, even though we've never played Survivor, we've never done reality shows, like yeah, it's just the narrative structure of how you want to something to be portrayed as a producer. You're not telling them to say this. And sometimes you could be splicing things together to make them say
Yeah.
the things you want. But a lot of the times it's carefully crafting the questions you are going to ask because those can create answers that you can utilize not only for your show, for your audience, but to also get someone to stretch the truth a little bit, to go along with your question a little bit, to just keep going to try and push their narrative, which could go along with your narrative, to which they could share with other players, to kind of coincide those narratives. And that's the characters of Survivor as well, where there's so many coinciding characters and narratives all clashing for each other. The producers are the connecting tissue to all that, trying to keep those connected, trying to find where they can find little wrinkles in a plan or where they can build someone up or tear someone down.
We're not gonna give away all of our secrets on this podcast on how we do what we do, by the way. But there was a little softball if you ever want to get into this. Um, let's get into heroes versus villains because this is a little bit of a footnote in her Survivor career. To be honest with you, I don't know many people would remember she was on Heroes versus Villains. She was only on a couple episodes, right?
Mhm.
She suffers a dislocated shoulder in the opening challenge of Heroes versus Villains. It was popped back into place by medical at challenge. You can say everything you want about Stephenie. You can't question the lady's not tough.
She's one of the toughest players, I think, to ever play the game in general. just going throughout her entire time in Survivor, you have to tough out in your first season being the last one standing on a tribe where you've watched everyone go out. Then you go into the next season, you perform well, but the jury does not react how you thought they were going to. Now you have to tough that out, react to that. You have to come back onto the next season, dislocate a shoulder, still come back, go out early in that one, and still have the toughness to come back for season 50. It's one of the ultimate toughness stories in the show.
But that toughness is a little easier with a filet mignon pizza. So, you know.
She had to tough all that stuff out too, all that controversy and came along with it. Not controversy.
Hopefully the filet mignon wasn't tough.
Yeah, that would not be well.
It's a waste of a great cut of meat. Um,
Yeah.
Also, I don't think that's the kind of meat you should use on a pizza, but
No,
that's a whole
no.
other conversation. All right, so she's on the Minority Alliance in the Heroes Tribe with Tom and Colby, picking up right where she left off with Tom,
Hmm.
pulling in Colby, which is a relationship we see later on season 50. She has a rivalry with James, which honestly could just be called James bullying Stephenie,
Yeah, I was gonna say
because
it's
that's what
really
it is.
it is.
Um, it's really interesting because I think James has a weirdly kind of similar arc to Stephenie in a way, where they really start up as huge heroes and they kind of become villains as they go.
Yeah, I think Stephanie, and we'll talk about her 50
Stephanie's isn't
in the end, coming
mean-spirited
back a bit.
necessarily.
Yeah. Yeah, but you start to see, I mean, everyone has a hero and a villain in them,
Yeah.
right? It just whether what side they're gonna be that's gonna be brought out of them when they go on an island and starve, and what side
Hmm.
the narrative is going to push. And you can do either of those on any season. Every character on any season. If the producers, if the team of Survivor wanted to portray them in a good or bad light, they have the capability to do so. They ask enough questions, they get enough footage, it's all there. It's just, yeah, I mean, they kind of just shifted her narrative as the show went on.
For sure. Um, Now, Tom and Colby do come to her rescue
Yeah.
after James attacks at Tribal, but she's voted out 6-3, and she suggests her tribe argue less upon her exit, but James shoots her down as she walks off the screen for, I think, what a lot of people thought might have been the final time.
Yeah, I thought that would be the case too when watching this season. Yeah, you just didn't really know if there was any meat left on the bone. Yes, I was going for the pun there again.
I mean, there are no bones in filet, but yeah, fair point.
Meat, just stick with that, okay?
Okay.
Um, we're stretching here. He didn't know what was left in the tank for, to use a non-meat related analogy there. But there was some left. Survivor saw something in her. They saw that toughness that she continued to show in the first three seasons, and that was enough to bring her back for a fourth.
Well, you know what CBS stands for? Comeback Stephenie.
Oh, I thought it was gonna be a steak joke or something.
Oh no, no. But they bring her
I'm
back
back, Stephanie.
for Survivor 50. Um, she gets into a majority alliance with Colby, Genevieve, Kyle, albeit briefly, Q, and Rizzo eventually on Vatu. Um, After the tribe swap, her and Q are at the bottom. Q is taken out after not having a vote. And is super lucky that Christian decides to turn on Mike and Angelina because she is dead woman walking up until the moment that Mike throws out that Emily is the new Gabby, and then the entire perspective flips.
Yeah, but yeah, she found herself in a bad spot there. I don't think it was due to gameplay. I
No,
think that you mentioned the alliance that she had. She did the right things, whether
yeah,
you want to say it was set up before the game or not. She had the right alliances in place to go far in the game, and things just did go her way. I think this is maybe her best setup early on in Survivor in terms of building
no doubt.
alliances that she can actually keep. Because she sets up alliances in other seasons, but can't really keep them due to going to tribal or being turned on or whatever it may be. But here, she has something ready to go, and some of those players stick around, but they slowly get picked off. It's not one by one. This time it's more spread out throughout the season until eventually it becomes her turn.
Well, and what's different here is like in her previous season, Stephenie very much likes to go with one or two people, right? In terms of who she aligns with. In Survivor 50, she gets a group of most of the tribe. And I think
Hmm.
that's the important distinction. She's not just looking for one person. She goes to Colby, which again is kind of this idea of finding one person. And Colby has already kind of expanded that. So Stephenie kind of gets this by association. But it's also her game play as well, her social game, right? Pulling in Genevieve, pulling in Kyle, pulling in all these people. Because it's one thing if Colby makes them feel comfortable, but if you're the person that's aligned with the person that makes them feel comfortable and they feel uncomfortable with you, you're probably one of the first ones out in that situation. So that works out for her. She wins Moon immunity, gets chosen to go on the journey, has to do one of the Parvati one hand up in the air challenges. Great hero moment here. Because you get the
Awesome.
flashback to her dislocated shoulder in Heroes versus Villains, wins a steal a boat, and I think the internet about exploded thinking she was going to win the season once this happened. That was not the case. Spoiler alert. Although if you're listening to this podcast, I'm
Hopefully
assuming you
not.
know what happens on Survivor 50. I hope so. It's been a couple of months. But yeah, great hero moment here.
It is awesome. And once we saw that was a challenge that Stephanie was going to be the one that was doing it, I think for the hardcore Survivor fans, you think back to the shoulder moment. You think
Hmm.
back to the toughness that she's had to display. And it's kind of silly. I enjoyed this journey a lot. I know people didn't really love this journey as much. This was one of my favorite journeys of the season, I think, just because of the narrative that's set up with it. But it is kind of silly just to watch her stand like this for an hour.
Yeah. Although
But
this became a Planet Fitness trend, though. I saw a million people on
yeah,
TikTok trying this.
yeah. How do they do? Was it easy? Did they say it was hard?
It's all in montage form, so it's kind of hard to tell.
That's valid. But yeah, I think even though it just looks like this the whole time, there's so much that is going into that. Into this little moment, that hour in time where Stephanie has to just continue to fight it out, tough it out for what might be one more run on Survivor. Going back to the beginning of the show, say what you want about why you thought Stephanie should have been on season 50 or not. It's a good moment.
Well, and this is also where we hear about Stephanie's family journey at this time, right? She
Hmm.
started a family since Heroes versus Villains. Like I said, she married Kyle Kendrick, former pitcher in the Major League Baseball. She um, she loses her brothers in the past couple of years, and that was their thing, Survivor. And she kept up with everything and went back on to honor their legacy. And it was cool that she got to share this moment here. What was less cool is that when she gets back and says she doesn't have an advantage, this does not get past Suri for a second. And this goes back to her time on Traders and Snake in the Grass playing together. And it's unfortunate. They always say to protect your number. Cerie's got Stephanie's.
It definitely does, yeah. She definitely knows Stephanie's game at this point. What the tells are when she lies. But that doesn't mean Stephanie's lying terribly. It means that she knows someone long enough for them
Hmm.
to catch on when you're lying. I mean, we've known each other for a bit. We can tell when something might be off, something might be
Yeah.
different, where people aren't going to pick up on that. The same thing in any relationship, especially if you're playing in a social game, you're going to be more in tune to pick up those social cues. And Suri just does. I don't think it's a matter of Stephanie having a bad story or being a bad liar, because I think it added up the way she puts it, but Suri just catches on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And also, we also have to remember who she's lying to here, which is Cerie, maybe the best liar in the show's history and maybe the best social player. So this is like playing one-on-one with Michael Jordan, right? Like you're not gonna, you're gonna be lucky if you get a free throw in,
Yeah,
right?
you could be
Against.
good and still look bad.
Hmm. All right. Um, she joins up with Honor and Integrity at the merge, which is just the easiest pickup ever in terms of where she's going to land. I don't think Stephanie was questioning where she was going to land for a second. right? She's with Joe and Jonathan and Coach and Chrissy. Um, and she goes on to say some not as kind things about Joe in her exit press. But we'll talk about her exit press in a little bit. Um, she tries to sniff out that Devon's idol is fake and asks for Christian to check. Um, and this makes me bring up the question because, we see later that Devon's is blowing up Stephanie's game eventually, right? And this is one of the things that leads to Stephanie's ouster, although I think she was kind of in a rough spot going at that point too. Um, is Devon's the biggest op for Stephanie in this game?
Didn't expect that question today, but that's a good point. I think just the way they come at the game too is so different. Where like obviously,
Polar opposites.
yeah, Stephanie's connecting with the loyal, those type of players where Devon's is gonna be all over the place. He's gonna go where the wind blows him, and Stephanie is trying to play this stricter rule-based game, which is not a bad game. But it's just when it's colliding with all these different, again, going back to the wind, when the winds combine, it can create a tornado, and that's kind of where they get caught.
And we're gonna talk about Rick Devens next week, right? But I think a lot of what we see currently with Rick Devens in the Big Brother house, calling out Rome, doing all this, throwing him under the bus, blowing up somebody who's in a decent positions game, is very much started here with Stephanie. This is the ground zero for Devens' plan here. He perfects it here, brings it into the Big Brother's house, knocks out somebody who is a major threat, who is leading the minority alliance, and blows up his game rather spectacularly with all accurate information, which is the same thing that happens here. All I'm saying is, Rome, you and Stephanie in the same boat here.
Yeah, you keep going back to the boat, bring it back to the beginning. They
How
got
about that?
jumping out of that boat.
But I mean, Stephanie's biggest weakness is Rick Devens, which is really ironic. Um, Stephanie and Jonathan try to put a hit on Ozzy at the Mr. Beast Tribal Council, where Devens is the decoy. Joe is the leak to Suri, putting Stephanie in the fire line. And it also doesn't help, like I just said, that Devens absolutely blows Stephanie's game to smithereens, and Stephanie goes on this word salad vomit spiral, which is preceding the current lettuce outbreak. But she's the ground zero. She starts just word vomiting all this word salad out, and it's not good. Not good.
Didn't expect that one to come up today either. Here we are.
No, I didn't
Here
either.
we are. Here we are. Yeah,
We're
I think
recording this a little later than we normally do. Can you
you can
tell?
probably tell. Um, yeah, but I think again, going back to the structure of how a character is going to be portrayed on the season, the way she goes out is not the most glamorous way, right? It's not in a crazy way. It's kind of, all right, well, Stephanie, your turn is kind of how it becomes the case. And in order to not make that feel like a bad moment, the story doesn't give you as much of Stephanie's perspective because you mentioned there is so much there. All of the things that happen with her brothers, that's a huge reason why she wants to come back. All the things she's had to endure on the show. The just the adaptability that she has had playing this game does not get talked about enough. But it's just a lot of things that get left on the cutting room floor there for Stephanie.
Well, and she packages all this up at Final Tribal Council and just keeps saying that Jonathan is the total package to the point where it gets a little borderline creepy, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, legitimately, and I think Jonathan would have lost anyway. I definitely don't think Steph helped here. It got to the point where I think more the jury was mad at Stephanie than was mad at Jonathan.
Yeah, it was a rough moment, but if you're on the jury and you really want someone to win, you have every right to fight for them.
That's
I won't
fair.
lie to you. I was annoyed because I wanted Aubrey to win. So I was like, stop talking, Stephanie. Well, I also realized she wasn't helping Jonathan's case. So I was like,
Yes,
keep
keep going,
talking.
keep going.
But because I like Aubrey so much and I
Yeah.
thought she deserved to win the season, then I was kind of annoyed by it. But that doesn't mean you don't have the right to speak your mind on the jury, but the other juries also have the right to say, hey, we need to just ask these people questions. We've talked on Ponderosa enough to each other.
Yeah.
Now it's time to talk to them.
I mean, I'm just gonna say if you're gonna go to bat for somebody at like a final tribal, I almost think it's better to have them explain it.
Yeah.
Um, or you can just take down somebody else. You could go full Reed here, and try to take down somebody, right? Like, and the thing about like what makes a Reed speech or a or an Eric speech, right, from Samoa, is the fact that those are like super dramatic, well thought out, like narratives changing, spinning, right? And with Stephenie, it's just a little clunky in the delivery, and I think
Yeah.
that's part of why this doesn't happen. And also, jurors are, it's not in the same format that it used to be, right? Like, it's not like one person gets a chance to speak and nobody else, right? Like, this is more of an open forum. And I don't think that maybe banging the drum for somebody goes as well here as it does in previous, right? Like, I think Tiffany in season 46 and Camilla in season 48 are probably the two most effective new era since the jury format has changed in terms of really backing one of the final three.
Maybe she's just been around the MLB too long with her husband. Like, the reason I say that is because um, she's trying to, like Kyle Kendrick did in the MLB, pitch it up for Jonathan to swing, but she's ultimately throwing the ball out of the box. Jonathan can't hit the ball. She's trying to give it to him so he can hit the home run, but it's out of reach.
Turned
It's
into a
not
wild
there.
pitch.
Yeah, it's just a wild pitch.
Yeah, that split finger curve will get you every time. All right. So, you ready to talk about some questions, some discussion points? And I'd be remiss. I think we kind of have to talk about the exit press with Stephenie. Because honestly, like the game didn't bother me as much with Stephenie. It was the exit press that really kind of bothered me with her. Um,
Yeah, I'm
she
gonna leave that to
basically,
you because I stayed away from it because you
yeah.
told me about this. So I said I don't want to see it.
Yeah,
But
I
continue.
texted you and I was like, I think Stephenie just spoiled the next episode in her exit press. And sure enough, I mean, it's not the next episode, but still, like, this is just, and Stephenie basically what she does is she's asked by multiple people, Mike Bloom, Dalton Ross, Rob, Sesternino, like she's asked by all these outlets, Shannon Tharp, like what her relationship with Ozzy and Suri, the two people that she was kind of going after, is, and she says some things that are not super kind about Joe, but really talks about Suri and Ozzy, and she's like, well, I guess we'll have to see how it works out for him.
Hmm.
And this very much read like she thought that she was doing something. It's kind of like the total package thing again, right? It's like I'm doing something, I'm playing the game too. Like I'm a step ahead, right? Fans are too smart, right?
Yeah.
It's not an era where fans are just going to watch the show on Wednesday and not think about it the rest of the week, right? Like those days are over. This is a
Especially if you're
fan
watching Exit
base.
Press. If you're watching Exit
Yeah.
Press, you're gonna be locked into the game and the things around the game.
And and there has to, and between the betting markets and the spoilers and the exit press, I mean, there's got to be something we got to do about this. And this is not like an us issue to solve, right? This is like an NDA issue and a exit press outlet issue, right? But man, like it just put a real bummer on this next couple of episodes, we just had the Mr. Beast coin flip and everyone was really excited and we were like, wow, that was awesome. And then immediately we knew basically what was going to happen the next episode. And it's just super unfortunate.
Yeah, luckily you veered me away from that path as I mentioned. But yeah, just another sinker that sunk too
I
low
was the
on the
sacrificial
box.
lamb.
Thank you, thank you.
I was caught
And
stealing.
we t- we turned. No, I was gonna make another steak joke, but it didn't work with the lamb. Okay, let's move on. Let's move
Yeah.
on to the questions for me before I ask you some questions.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have anything else on that though?
Um, yeah, my thoughts on that go to she's it's so raw when you're coming. I would imagine it has to be so raw when you're coming out of watching yourself on TV, especially
Mhm.
on season 50 in front of millions upon millions of viewers. And now you have to try and defend yourself without trying to say what's coming next. And the people that you might have been against are going to have their downfall, but you can't say why their downfall is coming and why
Mhm.
you might have had a part in it. It's difficult to balance that, but it's one of those things where you kind of just have to check your pride at the door. And I don't think this is out of pride that she's doing this. I just think this is a general thing. You just have to say what you need to say and get out. And if you want to explain after the season, you can. That's when social media can come into play. This is a general message, not related to Stephenie. If you were on the show, don't post anything spoiler related or don't say anything spoiler related in Exit Press until the show is over.
Save it
I'm
for your deep
tired.
dive with RHAP.
Right, or go on a Twitter rant, whatever you want. But I'm also just tired of the episode ended an hour ago. I just lost. Now I'm going to post my thank you to Survivor because this has happened to many people I know. You scroll upon that post and an episode you've been looking forward to all week long, maybe one of your favorite characters, that's spoiled for you. And that just stinks. This isn't a Stephenie related thing. She's just
Yeah,
a small part in this machine that's just
yeah.
been running faster and faster. But
Well,
it just bothers me.
and especially when it comes out late on the West Coast anyway, right?
Yes.
So that's a whole other thing. How did Stephanie's legacy change in Survivor 50? Because we talked about her in Palau as like the ultimate hero, like the apex mountain of heroes, right? In Survivor. And I guess this kind of rolls into our hero, villain, anti-hero question, right?
Hmm.
But how does her legacy change? Because it is distinctly different in Survivor 50. I don't think that is arguable. But is it still a hero legacy?
We talked about this journey, not the journeys on Survivor, but the journey
Hmm.
that she goes on at the beginning of the podcast, right? She has this long trek to the top of the mountain in Palau, then starts to take a tumble when it comes to the end of Guatemala, where she's starting to reach the peak. She's going far, making some mistakes, slides down, continues that downward spiral, and then kind of just runs out of energy. But she's so tough that she continues to try and get back up that mountain again. But at some point, you just run out of energy. And that's how it feels like Stephanie's character arc, not as a person, her character arc,
Hmm.
went on the show, where
Yeah.
she's able to climb up a little bit, but she just can't get back to that peak that she was at. And that's just a lukewarm ending to her story, but that's sometimes the reality of it.
Yeah. I was gonna say how I was gonna ask how Stephanie's previous games manifested themselves in Survivor 50, but I think we see that, and I think we kind of talked about that. Would Stephenie have fared better if she had played around the early to mid 20s? Like, say she was on Philippines, right? Like, or say she was on Caramoan, right? Like, does she fare better than she would on Survivor 50?
I like that question. I actually think the 30s are where Stephanie could have
Mm.
thrived.
Real,
That's
I almost feel like that's too gameplay heavy, like too game body, for Stephenie. Like Stephanie's not really like a game bot type of player. I mean, maybe on like HHH, she could have done something.
Mhm.
But yeah, yeah. What were you gonna say? Sorry.
Yeah, and I'm happy to have this conversation. I want to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think, yeah, there's the game bodiness to it, but there's also, we talked about her downfall on Guatemala, especially, is because she's turning on people left and right. Where in the 30s, that was just, I mean, it is the same case now, but especially in the 30s, I feel like that was just a common knowledge thing that you have to do,
Yep.
and no one's going to care. And it happened every single vote and every single season, it feels like, where she kind of just would have blended in enough where, yeah, she might not be that game body type, but that might keep her under the radar enough to make it to the end and maybe win a season.
That's fair. I feel like she probably has a similar trajectory. If we're taking her Survivor 50 game, right, and putting it into a mid 30 season, early 30 season, I feel like she kind of ends up like Ken from Millennials Gen X. Like,
Hmm.
gets to the end, maybe not get a lot of votes, like kind of viewed. I honestly think it's kind of a similar situation, right? But if we take her Survivor 50 gameplay, right, and put it in like one world, I think it's super successful. I think she gets to the end.
Yeah, that's a good season right there.
I
Yeah.
think she could I think she could win the game. Her and Troyzan would feed families.
Yeah. That's a good, yeah. Might not make
Like,
for a more entertaining season, even though it's not that entertaining anyway. But yeah, it's a good season for her to fall into.
and I would love to see her and Tarzan interact.
Hmm.
But that's a whole other thing. All right. Do you want to talk the question we normally ask? Hero,
Yeah.
villain, anti-hero?
Yeah, let's do it. So, at the end of every podcast, we ask the question. Tristan throws in some wonderful, insightful questions, but I always like to ask at the end, or the character we are talking about on the podcast is a hero, a villain, or an anti-hero throughout the entirety of their time on the show. Tristan, this is a tough one, I feel like.
It
So,
is.
I mean, we always start with you, but I'm glad we're starting with you today, especially because this is a tough one to think out.
Well, I'm gonna play the Uno reverse card on you because in the solidarity with Danny Boatwright, I refuse to answer the question. I'm
Oh
just
no,
kidding. I'm just
no,
kidding.
please no.
Um, I think Stephanie's a tragic hero. And I think that's like its own subcategory, right? Like I don't think that's anti-hero, I don't think that's hero, and I don't think that's villain, right? I think Stephenie is like I'm trying to think of a superhero like that. It's almost like a Luke Skywalker, right? Um in Star Wars, right? So Luke starts, right? Like huge rise, like the person, the guy, Stephenie is that girl on Survivor. Um, Goes away for a long time. Everyone wonders what they're doing. They come back and it's not quite what everyone expected. And I think that's kind of the tragic hero-y type for Stephenie. Like there are some good moments, there are some bad moments. Return to the Jedi is kind of Guatemala for Stephenie. And then you get to sorry, 50 and it's the Last Jedi, and then she kind of just fades away.
I love what you said there because this is why I let you go first because I can just build on that. The tragic hero, I think, is the perfect way to describe it. I'll throw in another analogy just to continue on with this conversation. Again, this is the arc of Stephenie. This is not Stephenie as a person. I do think
Correct.
Stephenie has grown over the years progressively in major ways due to
Yeah.
Survivor and life. But on Survivor, she kind of gives the peaked in high school vibe, right?
Mm.
Like, where you did so many things early on in your life, in your career, whatever it may be, that you can always look back upon that, but you can never replicate it. And those parts will always be with you. You'll always have those parts, but you just can't be that same person.
Yeah.
People will still look upon you and see you for what you were, but then look at you now and realize that might not be what you are now.
Her gameplay is kind of like the person at the back corner of the bar in your college town. That's like, remember when we used to run the frats?
Hmm. Yeah, it's
Or
like,
like, remember when I blew my knee out as the quarterback on the high school football team, and that's
yeah,
why I didn't get signed to UCLA, right?
exactly.
Like that's kind of Stephanie's gameplay. And that's not, again, we want to make this abundantly clear. This is not on Stephenie as a person, right? Um, we are big proponents of these people are people, right? And the way they're portrayed on these shows is not who they are as people, unless for very specific circumstances, of which there are some, and we are definitely not going to talk about those people. Those people are generally on the persona non grata list on terms of who we talk about here. But yeah, like this is all just examining the character of Stephenie on the show, what we get from her, and yeah, we hope this has been an insightful convo. Maybe got everyone thinking a little bit about what we
Yeah,
saw from Stephenie.
I have one more question on that
Yeah.
regard, just to close this out,
Hmm.
because I think that's an important distinction that we've made multiple times. So my question is, how does the way Stephenie was portrayed on the show compared to who she seems to be in real life? How do you think the producers were trying to push that? I know it's a tough one.
Wow, that might be the toughest question I think you've asked the entire time. Um, so I think like there's definitely a part of Stephanie that you can see that she is a tough woman, right? And you see that right in her own personal life. And this is hard because I don't know her personally, right? Like I
Right.
think everyone on social media also has this veneer of having everything figured out, right? And if you actually get to know somebody on the inside, it's definitely different. But yeah, I think that there are definitely parts there. But I also think Stephanie is acutely aware of how she is portrayed on TV. And I think kind of like we talked about with Christian, last week. Like she knows how she's going to show up on TV, right?
Hmm.
Palau, like she knew she was a fan favorite. That's why she was brought back for Guatemala, right? She has the social capital to go and play a cutthroat game. Nobody remembers her for the villainous gameplay she had on Guatemala, right? She kind of has a blank card because everyone remembers Palau so much, right? She goes out with a little bit of a whimper in Heroes versus Villains, kind of sticks it to the bully, right? Like not a ton there. And then we get to Survivor 50, and I think she very much is aware that, hey, I'm a hero character. I'm kind of on house money here. Whatever happens, like I'm in it to win it. But if not, I don't really care how I'm portrayed. Like I know people, it's not going to change my image with the grand population that much. Like certain sects of the survivor community, right, that are very much plugged in or online or follow these people in day-to-day life are going to think differently, right? But I think to the general fan base that tunes in on Wednesday night, they're still going to remember the Stephanie that was 25 years old on Palau and was the last woman standing.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. I mean, that was a great answer to the question. I know I kind of threw that one out there
Yeah,
at you.
that what the heck, man? That was tough.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer it in my own way too. I won't ask you something I wouldn't answer myself. But I think there are parts of who Stephanie is. Again, we don't know her personally. We probably won't
Yeah.
bear her. Who knows? But I think there's a hope in there that gets portrayed as hopelessness on the
Mm,
show. There's a toughness in there that gets displayed as toughless. Like there's just the opposite of the strong parts of her are kind of taken away on Survivor because
mm,
she is not able to overcome the obstacles ultimately to win the game like she did early
yeah.
on, where they're kind of taking the positive parts about her and making those seem less. And I
Yeah.
think that's really where the distinction comes from. So it's a tough one to talk about.
Yeah.
We weren't trying to be negative towards Stephanie.
No.
I think she's one of the best stories on the show. There's a big reason why she came back for 50. She definitely will forever leave her mark on the show and on those who loved her and appreciated her like we did many times throughout her Survivor career.
Yeah. Well, we hope you've enjoyed our conversation about Stephenie LaGrossa Kendrick on today's episode of Character Study, a Survivor podcast. We got a good one coming on Friday. I think this is a hidden gem of an episode. We're talking about Emily Flippin. Um, not to push anything on anybody, right? But I think it's going to be a pretty solid episode. So you'll have to tune in on Friday for that. Tyler, anything before we go? Wow,
I
look at that.
do.
He already has it ready a couple days in advance. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Uh, anything you got before we wrap it up?
I don't think so. Yeah, stay tuned for what's coming with Emily. Continue to stay engaged. We love
Mm-hmm.
comments, likes, whatever it may be. Yeah, I mean, Tristan always says at the beginning of the podcast, be a main character for us. That means being involved, right? Being someone that we can interact with and as humans, as characters in our own right, get to know you better. Right now we have a small community and we want to continue to grow that, especially once the Survivor off season comes to an end
Mm-hmm.
and we get back to the season propers once more. So now is your chance to get in early, become that main character, and we can build that connection and build this foundation of Character Study, a Survivor podcast further into the future.
Sounds good. I couldn't have said it better myself. Well, we thank you for tuning in to Character Study Survivor Podcast. This one was about Stephenie LaGrossa. Again, we're talking about Emily Flippin on Friday. We hope to see you there. See you later.